The morning sun bathed the green fields in golden light, and Kael walked in silence among the tall grass, his bow resting on his back, as always. Patrol. That was what he called these long walks through the land surrounding the forest, though in truth, they were more a way to keep his mind occupied than any real necessity. 3 months had passed since Elena had departed. 3 months since they had found Mira in that port city, and he had watched the two sisters embrace, tears and laughter mixing in a moment he would never forget. Elena had invited him to stay, to build a new life alongside them in the small village where they had decided to start over. He had refused, not because he didn't care, but because solitude was the only language he truly knew how to speak. Now, walking through those fields he knew so well, Kael wondered if he had made the right choice. The cabin felt emptier than before. The silence that had once been a refuge now seemed more like a prison. He stopped at the top of a small hill, his trained eyes scanning the horizon. Nothing but grass, a few scattered trees, and in the distance, the smoke from the village's chimneys. Another peaceful day in a world that rarely offered peace. That's when he saw the movement. A figure was running through the fields, running with the desperation of someone fleeing death itself. Kael's hand went to his bow instinctively, but he didn't draw an arrow. Not yet. First, he needed to understand what was happening. The figure drew closer, and he realized it was a woman, young, perhaps 25 years old, with brown hair that flew behind her like a banner. Her simple dress was stained with mud and sweat, and even from a distance he could see the terror stamped on her face. She was running directly toward him. Kael remained motionless, waiting. His muscles were tense, ready for any eventuality. The woman could be bait for an ambush. She could be a thief, a distraction while accomplices circled around. Years of survival had taught him to trust nothing and no one. But when their eyes met, he saw something that dissolved his suspicions. Genuine despair. Please. The word came out as a sob, even before she reached him. Please. You have to help me. She ran the final meters that separated them and, before Kael could react, threw herself into his arms. Her body collided with his with such force that he had to take a step back to maintain balance. She clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling. Kael froze. It wasn't fear. It wasn't distrust. It was something deeper, more visceral. Human touch. When was the last time someone had touched him with something other than the intent to harm? When was the last time someone had sought refuge in his presence? Please, the woman repeated, her voice muffled against his chest. They're going to take everything. My family, my daughter, please. Her body trembled violently, and Kael felt the dampness of her tears soaking through his shirt. Something inside him, something he thought had died years ago, stirred. Slowly, hesitantly, his arms rose and wrapped around her, not with force, but with a gentleness that surprised even himself. Calm down. His voice came out hoarse, unused to offering comfort. Calm down and tell me what happened. The woman pulled away just enough to look at him. Her eyes were red, swollen, but behind the tears there was a determination that impressed him. Tax collectors. She spat the words as if they were poison. They came to our farm this morning. They say we owe taxes from 3 years ago. Taxes my husband already paid. I swear he paid. But they say there's no record. Kael felt his jaw tighten. Tax collectors. He knew the type. Corrupt men who used the authority of the crown to extort those who couldn't defend themselves. How much do they say you owe? 50 gold coins. The woman laughed, but it was a hollow sound, devoid of any humor. 50 coins. We don't even have 5. We're farmers, not merchants. And if you can't pay? The woman's face crumbled. Fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. They said if we can't pay by sunset, they'll take the house. And, her voice broke, and they'll take my daughter and me as payment. To settle the debt. The words hit Kael like a punch to the gut. Payment. Human beings being used as currency. The same practice that had destroyed his family, that had taken his sister, that continued to poison the world no matter how many men he killed. Your daughter, he said, his voice dangerously calm. How old is she? 8 years old. The woman sobbed. My little Lily. She's only 8 years old. Something inside Kael caught fire. Not the hot, explosive rage that leads to reckless acts, It was a cold rage, controlled, infinitely more dangerous. The kind of rage that sharpened his senses instead of clouding them. "Where is your farm?" The woman looked at him, a spark of hope lighting in her devastated eyes. "Half an hour to the east. Near the old mill. But there are 6 of them. 6 armed men. You can't. What's your name?" The question interrupted her protest. "Helena," she replied, confused. "Helena Ashford. Helena." Kael gently released her and took a step back. "Go back to your family. Tell them help is coming." "But how long until sunset?" Helena looked at the sky, calculating. 4 hours. Maybe 5. "I'll be there in 2. He began to turn, but Helena grabbed his arm. "Wait. I don't even know your name. Why would you help us? You don't know me. You don't know my family." Kael looked at her over his shoulder. In his eyes, Helena saw something that made her release his arm and step back. It wasn't threat. It wasn't madness. It was certainty. The absolute, unshakable certainty of someone who had already made a decision and would not be swayed. "My name is Kael," he said simply, "and I'm going to help because some debts can't be paid with gold. Some debts can only be paid with blood." The Ashford farm was exactly as Helena had described, small, modest, but well maintained. The kind of place where a family had poured years of work and love into every fence, every wall, every inch of cultivated land. There was a vegetable garden beside the main house, flowers in the windows, a wooden swing hanging from an old oak tree, and in the middle of the yard, 6 men surrounding a family. Kael observed from behind a group of trees, his trained eyes cataloging every detail. The tax collectors, if that's what they could be called, were exactly the type he expected. Rough men with cruel faces, wearing armor that was too fine for simple government functionaries. Their swords were drawn, not sheathed. This wasn't an official collection. It was extortion with a thin veneer of legality. The leader was obvious. A large man with a scar crossing his face from forehead to jaw. He stood before a man Kael assumed was Helena's husband, a thin farmer with calloused hands and terrified eyes. Beside him, an elderly woman, probably the grandmother, held a little girl in her arms. Lily, 8 years old, the same age his sister was when they took her. "I already told you, we paid." The farmer's voice carried across the distance, trembling but defiant. 3 years ago. "I have the receipt somewhere. I just need time to find it." "Time is something you don't have, Thomas." The scarred leader laughed. "The sun is setting. Where's my money? Please, give me 1 more day. I can sell some animals. I can." "1 more day?" The leader took a threatening step forward. "You've already had 3 years of days. No, the debt is settled today. One way or another." His eyes slid to the little girl in the grandmother's arms, and Kael saw the man smile, a predator's smile. "Although, looking at your daughter, perhaps we can negotiate a different type of payment." Thomas advanced with a scream of rage, but 2 collectors grabbed him before he could take 3 steps. They threw him to the ground and began kicking him while the grandmother screamed and Lily cried. That's when an arrow embedded itself in the ground between the leader's feet. Everyone froze. "The next one goes through your eye." Kael's voice echoed across the yard as he emerged from behind the trees. "Release the man." The collectors exchanged glances. The leader narrowed his eyes, assessing this unexpected newcomer. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's giving you a chance you don't deserve." Kael continued advancing. Another arrow already knocked. "Release the man. Leave this farm. Never come back." The leader laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You think you can threaten us? Do you know who we work for? We have the authority of the crown. You have the authority of your own greed." Kael stopped 10 meters from the group. "I've seen your type before. Fake collectors extorting families who can't defend themselves. There are no official records of this debt because the debt doesn't exist." The leader's face hardened. "Dangerous words, stranger. 6 against 1. I like those odds. Then you're bad at math." Before anyone could react, Kael's bow sank. The arrow crossed the distance in the blink of an eye and embedded itself in the shoulder of the man closest to Thomas. He fell screaming, releasing the farmer. Chaos erupted. 2 collectors advanced with swords drawn while 2 others tried to circle around. The leader drew his own weapon, eyes fixed on Kael with murderous hatred. Kael moved like the wind. His second arrow found the thigh of one of the attackers, dropping him before he covered half the distance. He released the bow and drew his hunting knife as the third man reached him. Metal against metal. The collector was strong, but Kael was faster. He deflected the first blow, spun out of the blade's reach, and buried his knife in the back of the man's knee. The scream that followed was swallowed by the sound of his body hitting the ground. "Kill him," the leader screamed. "Kill him now." The two who had been circling attacked simultaneously. Kael dropped to a roll, dodging both blades by centimeters. He rose with the knife in his left hand and a rock the size of a fist in his right. The rock found one man's temple with lethal precision. He crumbled like a puppet with cut strings. The last subordinate hesitated. That hesitation cost him 3 fingers when Kael's knife sliced through the air. He fell to his knees, screaming, clutching the bleeding stump. Now, it was just the leader. The scarred man looked around at his fallen men, and for the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. He raised his sword, but his hands were shaking. Who are you?" Kael advanced slowly, knife in hand, eyes fixed on his prey. "I told you, someone who's giving you a chance." He stopped one step away from the leader's reach. "One chance. Leave now. Never come back. Forget this family exists. And if I refuse, then I'll add one more grave to this land." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the moans of the wounded seemed to diminish, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The leader looked into Kael's eyes and saw something that made his sword fall from his trembling hands. It wasn't threat. It wasn't madness. It was the calm certainty of someone who had killed before and would kill again without a moment's hesitation. I'll go." He retreated, hands raised. "I'll go. We'll never come back. I swear. Take your men." The leader began to drag his wounded, one by one, away from the farm. Kael watched every movement, arrow knocked again, ready for any sign of treachery. When the last collector disappeared over the horizon, Helena emerged from the house. Kael hadn't even noticed she was back. "You." She looked at the blood on the ground, at the weapons abandoned in the chaos. "You did it. You really did it. They'll come back," Kael said, lowering his bow. "Men like them always come back. Then what do we do?" Kael looked at the family that was now gathering in the yard. Thomas, limping but alive, supported by his elderly mother. Little Lily, still in tears, but safe. Helena, her eyes shining with a gratitude that made him uncomfortable. "You have family elsewhere? Friends who could shelter you?" Helena and Thomas exchanged glances. "My brother," Thomas said. "He lives in a village to the north. 2 days of travel. He's been asking us to move there for years. Then go. Pack only what you can carry. Leave before nightfall." "But the farm?" Helena looked around at everything they had built. "This is our home." A home can be rebuilt," Kael said, his voice softening slightly. "A family can't. Your daughter is worth more than any piece of land." Lily, who until then had been clinging to her grandmother's skirt, let go and walked toward Kael. Her tear-streaked face looked up at him with an expression that made something inside him crack. "Are you an angel?" she asked, her voice small. "Mama said angels protect people." Kael felt the air leave his lungs. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He saw his sister in those innocent eyes. He saw Elena. He saw every person he hadn't been able to save, and every person he might still save. He knelt before the girl, putting himself at her height. "I'm not an angel," he said gently, "but I promise you this, while I'm here, nothing bad will happen to you or your family." Lily smiled. A pure, trusting smile that struck him harder than any blow he'd ever received. "Thank you, Mr. Kael." Kael helped the family pack. It wasn't something he had planned to do. His intention had been to ensure the collectors had left, and then return to his solitary life. But something held him there. Maybe it was the way Helena looked at him, as if he were the answer to a prayer. Maybe it was Thomas's quiet gratitude as they worked side by side packing what could be saved. Or maybe it was Lily, who followed him around like a shadow, peppering him with questions he didn't know how to answer. "Why do you live alone?" she asked as he tied a bundle of clothes. "Because I'm used to it. Don't you get sad?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Kael didn't know how to respond. Children had that ability to ask questions that adults spent their entire lives avoiding. Sometimes, he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Then you should live with people, Lily said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. People who like you, like us. Kael looked at the girl, unable to form words. Lily. Helena appeared at the door. Stop bothering Mr. Kael. She's not bothering me. Kael rose, avoiding Helena's eyes. She just asks difficult questions. Helena smiled, a tired but warm smile. She's always been like that, my little philosopher. The sun was beginning to set when everything was ready. A cart loaded with essentials, 2 old horses, and a family ready to start over. Thomas approached Kael, hand extended. I don't know how to thank you. You saved our lives. You saved my daughter. Kael shook his hand. Protect them. That's the only thanks I need. Come with us. The invitation came from Helena. My brother has land. He could use someone like you. Someone to protect the village. Kael looked at the family. Part of him, a bigger part than he wanted to admit, wanted to say yes. Wanted to abandon the solitary cabin and the silence that had become unbearable. But another part, the part that still mourned a sister he had lost and a life that could never be recovered, held him back. I can't. Why? Lily asked, suddenly appearing between her parents. Don't you like us? It's not that. Kael knelt before her again. There are other people who might need help. Other families like yours. If I'm in one place, I can't be in others, but you'll be alone. Maybe not forever. The words came out before he could stop them. Maybe one day I'll find a place where I can stay, but not today. Lily threw her arms around his neck, hugging him with all the strength her small body possessed. Kael froze for a moment, then slowly wrapped his arms around her. Promise you'll visit, she whispered. Promise, I promise. When she finally released him, there were tears in her eyes, but also a smile. The family climbed into the cart. Thomas took the reins. Helena settled beside him with Lily on her lap, and the grandmother sat in the back, among the bundles and memories of a life left behind. Kael, Helena called out before they left. What you did today, you gave us more than just our lives. You gave us hope. Don't forget that. He didn't respond. He just watched as the cart began to move, as the family headed toward the horizon and a new life. He watched until they disappeared from sight. Kael returned to the cabin as the stars began to appear in the sky. The journey back seemed longer than usual, his thoughts heavy as stones. The cabin was exactly as he had left it. Dark, silent, empty. He lit the fire and sat in the chair by the fireplace, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. In his hands, he held something Lily had given him before leaving, a small wooden flower, clumsily carved, but made with love. For you to remember us, she had said, so you won't be so alone. Kael looked at the flower and felt something that surprised him. A smile. Small, hesitant, but genuine. Maybe solitude wasn't his destiny. Maybe those years of isolation had been just a pause. A time to heal wounds that seemed incurable. Maybe the world still needed people like him, people willing to face the darkness, so that families like the Ashfords could find the light. He rose and placed the wooden flower on the cabin's only shelf, beside the window where morning light would touch it. Tomorrow, he would patrol again. Tomorrow, there might be someone else who needed help. Someone else who would throw themselves into his arms and beg for salvation. And when that moment came, he would be ready. Because Kael had finally understood what Elena had tried to tell him 3 months ago. Solitude was not protection. It was a prison he had built for himself. And the only way to escape was to let others in. One person at a time. One family at a time. One life at a time. He went to bed that night with a peace he hadn't felt in years. The wooden flower watched from the shelf. A small reminder that even the most solitary archer could find his way back to the world. And somewhere, on a road to the north, a little girl looked at the stars and smiled, knowing that an angel who didn't believe he was an angel was watching over the world.